lifting up Jesus, opening his word from Australia, Denmark, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Singapore, South Africa, United Kingdom, Thailand, the Philippines, United States, and throughout the world. You're watching Moriel TV.
This is Tim from Moriel TV and Moriel Radio, here with Jacob Prasch, live in Israel. Jacob, one of the believers had the question. He had wondered how you're in Israel right now. What is the mood in Israel? Do you see more Jewish people turning toward Christ, away from Christ? What is the current religious state of Israel?
Okay, Israel is largely a divided country between the secular Jews and the religious. The ultra-Orthodox having a much higher birth rate and a much disproportional influence in government due to proportional representation in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. It's politically complicated. But it's divided between the religious and the secular. The secular in Israel are generally known as Hilonim, Hellenized Jews, or Masoratim. They're not avowed atheists, most of them. Just religion is part of their culture. They'll go to the synagogue at certain times, mainly the high holy days, Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, but that'll be about it. That is the way Israel is. It's very much a secular state of Jews, apart from the religious. Yet something is curious. Many secular Israelis, many, who are in no sense religious, or at least in hardly any sense religious, other than traditional. They'll go to synagogue at the high holy days, the way nominal Christians will go to church for Christmas or Easter. They have a sense, many of them, that there is some kind of spiritual or prophetic meaning to the nation Israel and its rebirth. You will see this not only among Israelis, but diasporic Jews. People come to the Wailing Wall and begin crying, who've never believed in God before, but they go there and pray, and they begin weeping, and they don't know why. This is not uncommon. It happens every day virtually. And these are people with no particular religious orientation, just that they're Jews, and many of them Israelis. Another factor is the army. People having lost comrades and relatives in the war and lost them to terror. The Lord is near to those who mourn. Where you have this happening, you're going to find people more conscious of their own immortality in any country, in any culture, Israel being no exception. Third factor is this. The Western world, and Israel is a Western country, although it has an Eastern culture in certain aspects, it's a Western country. Israel has to be understood somewhat like Korea, Singapore, and Japan. Although it is an Oriental country, it has a Western system of government and economy. And a lot of people speak English, like in Singapore. Something like that. There is a spiritual hunger. Western society is no longer really secular. It is post-Judeo-Christian, but it is New Age. It's looking for some spiritual meaning, and it's looking largely in New Age. It's looking for a spiritual consciousness. Now, you do have a popular version of Kabbalah, thanks to Hollywood, that's not real Kabbalah, and the real ultra-Orthodox practitioners of it would laugh at the Madonna version.
Yeah, I didn't know that. How is it a lucky number?
13 is the age when, that's why boys get bar mitzvahed at the age of 13, by the way. It's the age when the soul gets completely, like, sort of solidified in your body. When you come into your own.
Is this one of those Kabbalah things?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it is.
So you've been doing some spiritual searching?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a party, like a Kabbalah party in New York? I saw that there was like an invitation of some sort, didn't you?
In New York? No. I had a cocktail party.
A Kabbalah cocktail party?
Kabbalah.
Kabbalah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, Kabbalah if you're Israeli, I guess.
Now, how did you become involved in this?
A girlfriend of mine was going all the time and to these classes. They're classes. It's the Kabbalah Learning Center. And basically the Kabbalah is the mystical interpretation of the New Testament. And she kept telling me about this really charismatic rabbi named Eitan who told these great stories, and she kept going on and on about it, and and I said, listen, Susan, I'm not even Jewish. Why are you telling me these things? And she's like, you don't have to be Jewish. Just come and take it, study, and if you like it, well, you like it. If you don't, leave. So I did. And this is taking some Kabbalah classes.
Really?
It's really great. It's really great.
And what have you gotten out of it?
I've gotten out of it. Listen, I couldn't get into it on a, in a 2-second sort of glib interview, but I mean, the thing about the Kabbalah is that there's similarities in the Kabbalah the Kabbalah has similarities with, say, Buddhism, the whole idea of cause and effect, and for every action there's a reaction, and that you absolutely are the master of your destiny, and that that you have to take responsibility for the chaos in your life. You can't go around saying, oh, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and I'm a victim, and this happened to me. It's like you pull in what you put out, basically. And if you want to have goodness in your life, then you have to give it.
But New Age is very big in Israel. Eastern religion, meditation, the same should have in any Western country, yoga and so forth. But something else happens. Because of the recognized hypocrisy of most religious Jews, particularly the ultra-Orthodox, who are exempt from the army when other Israelis have to serve, when they can sit in a yeshiva all day and get paid for it with subsidies from the Israeli taxpayers, while normal Israeli young people have to go to the army. And these religious cowards, is what they are, hide on back of Jews who are braver than themselves. Their sons, the yeshiva bookers, go to a yeshiva. Or when there's a war, they got on the next airplane to Brooklyn. The real Israelis stay and fight. This disgusts Israelis. They find it disgusting. Something else. Of the 60 to 70 nations in the world that can be broadly called democratic, there is only one where Jews do not have freedom of religion. That is Israel. For any kind of legally recognized rite of passage, any kind of civilly licensed function such as a marriage or signing a burial certificate or anything like that, or conversion or anything, only the Orthodox are recognized. Now, almost all Orthodox Jews opposed Zionism. They opposed the reestablishment of the Jewish state. They were against Ben Gurion. They were against Theodor Herzl. Most didn't care about it, a few exceptions, and many actively opposed it, believing there can be no Jewish state till the Messiah comes, and some ultra-Orthodox sects still hold to that. God had to use secular Jews to reestablish Israel, not the religious ones, but now that it's a state despite the opposition and non-participation of religious Jews, they want to control it. This bothers secular Israelis. You didn't found this state. You didn't build this country. Kibbutzniks did. Moshavniks did. Jewish socialists did, but you didn't. You religious people did not support it. Most of you opposed it. Now you want to control it. This bothers them. The cowardice of the yeshiva bookers, not serving in the army, bothers them. That religious girls don't have to serve in the military, but secular Israeli girls do. Yet at the same time, the religious say that all Jews should become religious. Well, then who's going to serve in the army? There is a small religious branch of the army called Hesder Yeshiva, but not that large. And the ultra-Orthodox don't serve at all. This is a problem. And so, because of the hypocrisy and the cowardice of the Orthodox religious establishment, in a country where Reformed Jews, conservative Jews, cannot even be licensed as rabbis to perform a wedding. People who are even against the state, some of them can. And they're subsidized in the yeshivas for not fighting while the other Israelis have to go to the army. This turns young people off. So fortunately, as a result of this, the stinking corruption, and there's a lot of corruption. Many Israelis describe the kashrut, the kosher certifications in restaurants, as a kind of protection racket almost. The corruption, the hypocrisy, the cowardice turns off secular Jewish young people to Talmudic Judaism, to halakhic Judaism. They don't want anything to do with it. As a result, they look elsewhere, many to Eastern religion. There is a sociological phenomenon where young Israelis get out of the army, and before they begin their university studies, they go to Thailand or to the Far East. Moriel has a branch in Thailand, and it's saturated with Israeli young people after the army. Why is this? Why are they looking elsewhere? Well, because they don't trust or believe the rabbis. This has created an opportunity for believers, for the local body of Yeshua, of Messiah, to reach out with the gospel to disoriented Israeli young people and show them, look, these rabbis who you disdain, these Orthodox who you look down upon as parasites and cowards, they're not the true Judaism. The true Judaism is fulfilled in Yeshua the Messiah. And all Jewish believers in Israel voluntarily serve for the army, including many Arab Christians who don't have to. But not only that, a disproportionately very high percentage of the Israeli believers who go to the army are what we call mitnadim karavi. They volunteer for combat brigades. They want to be fighters. They don't want to be in logistics or things or administrative positions in the army. They want to be in tanks, in artillery, in infantry, and paratroopers and things of this nature. They are fighters. This is a good witness and a good testimony to the Israeli people. They meet other guys in the army who are believers. Not a lot, but a growing number, and they do have an impact. So that is one area of growth in Israel among the secular young people, a number of them Sephardic, a number Ashkenazi. The second is the immigrants from the former Soviet Union who have come out of a spiritual vacuum. I've been to Russia, and I've seen the Jewish community in Russia. And those people who were under the communists in the Iron Curtain in the days of the old Soviet Union, they know almost nothing or absolutely nothing of religion or Judaism. They're not blinded by the traditional obstructions to evangelism that other Jews are due to the rabbis. Thirdly, Israel is a fairly well-educated society. When you educate young people, you teach them to think, and they think rationally. A lot of them go into technical fields like engineering and the sciences. And they're willing to consider, on a purely intellectual level, the claims of Jesus and the New Testament once Jesus is presented as a Jewish figure, a Jewish rabbi, a Jewish prophet, a Jewish Messiah. So there have been inroads in the universities among young people. Then, on top of that, with the Russian immigrants particularly, you have the Falashas, the black African Jews who came from Ethiopia. A number of them arrived as believers. There had been evangelistic efforts from Great Britain working among the Falashas for decades. The Falashas have been very, very open, and some of them already believed, or at least were acceptable to the Messiahship of Jesus before their arrival in Israel. There have also been an immigration of believers from the diaspora who were saved abroad, particularly the United States. They contribute to the milieu. Some of them for better, some of them bring the nonsense of the New Apostolic Reformation and deception with them, and hyper-messianic extremism, which is not here to the degree it is in the diaspora. Nonetheless, yes, there is an open door in Israeli society. There is much more openness to the gospel than there once was, and there are far many more Jewish believers. When I first arrived in Israel in the 1970s, there were about 200 known Jewish believers in Israel, and everybody knew everybody. There were about a dozen, or not more than 24 Messianic fellowships of any description in the 1970s. Less than 24. Only about a dozen viable ones, at most. 200 believers. Thereabout. Nobody can tell you now. There are fellowships meeting in homes that speak only Russian. Nobody can even tell you how many congregations there are, or fellowships there are, let alone how many believers. But it is obviously well into the thousands. Well into the thousands. From a few hundred, 200 in the 1970s, to several thousand today. And again, you have estimates of 6, 8. Nobody really knows. Now this can become complicated because of what some people call secret believers. Many of these people are saved out of Orthodox families. I've even met some from Mea Shearim and the most ultra-Orthodox shtetls, Hasidic neighborhoods imaginable. The problem is, Jesus said, if you don't confess me before men, I will not confess you before my Father who is in heaven. You don't know if these people are truly saved because a number of them are Ebionites, or seem to be Neo-Ebionites. They can believe that Jesus is the Messiah, but don't want anybody to know it, except believers who they'll meet with secretly or tell secretly. But they won't tell the community, the family, because of the ramifications. They'll say he's the Messiah, but they may not believe in his deity. They may not believe that he's God who became a man. So it's not easy to say how many, but the numbers have grown astronomically and are continuing to grow. I just went to a congregation in a place called Netanya. There used to be only one congregation in Netanya. Now there's a second one, and it's not small, and it's growing. Moriel is partnered with another congregation in central Galilee. I used to, I say this humbly, teach the scripture to the pastor when he was a young believer in my apartment in a little Bible study we had on Mount Carmel. And now he's the pastor of a significant congregation that's large, so large they've had to relocate to a new facility. We're trying to help them financially with the new building because they've outgrown the old one. And this even in the face of a certain amount of opposition. It's unbelievable to me when I go to these congregations I visited recently in Netanya and in Carmel. I don't want to say anything further in the public domain about the identity of the people or the congregations. But the size of them is not small. A congregation used to be 15, 20, 25 people, 30 maybe. Now, 200. In addition to smaller ones springing up all the time. God is doing something here in Israel. Right from the beginning, Moriel had the Jerusalem Evangelism Fund, and we urge people to pray for the salvation of Israel and the Jews and the Arabs. The Arab brethren are another story. They're divided. We have those who are supportive of Israel because they recognize the persecution of Arab believers at the hands of Islam and are pro-Zionist, appreciative of the religious freedom they have as Arab Christians that they would not get in the Muslim world. There are others, however, that have become de facto apologists for terror. There's a disgusting organization called Muslim Halal, and these people are anti-Zionist, but they behave like apologists for Islamic terror, turning their back on the persecution of Arab believers among their own people in order to placate radical Islamists and the Palestinian Authority at the expense of the persecuted Arab Christians that will vent their hatred for Israel. They are aligned with such false teachers as what I call pseudo-theologian Gary Burge from the United States, Wheaton College, Colin Chapman in Great Britain, and other such religious people. A fluid situation, but God is plainly working. Now we have to understand something. Peter tells us that we can hasten the return of Jesus. Remember, one of the reasons that Jesus did not know when he was here of the day of his return, he may, we assume, know in eternity, but he did not know when he was here, is because the date relative to us was not fixed. In Luke 4, it says he returns when the crop permits. As we read in the Song of Solomon, do not awaken my beloved until she pleases. Something we've dealt with in our books and which we are looking at again from a different aspect in the book that's presently being written, No Balm in Gilead. Peter says we can hasten his coming. But Jesus tells us directly that we will not finish evangelizing Israel. We will not go to all of the villages and towns in Israel before he comes. By evangelizing Israel, Jew and Arab, by evangelizing Israel, we can make Jesus come back faster. Peter says we can hasten his coming. Jesus says we will not finish evangelizing Israel before he comes. And he was speaking about the reborn state of Israel, as per Luke 21:24, Matthew 23, etc. And so here we are, Moriel Israel, part of the local body of Yeshua in Israel, affiliated and supportive of various local congregations that we are on back of and working with to bring the good news back home again. And it is coming home again. Jews are being saved in large numbers in the United States and to a degree in a number of other countries. This is true. This is God's hand. They are coming to faith in the diaspora. But now they are also coming to faith in Aretz Israel. The Lord is indeed doing it. And he shall continue to do it. My wife comes from a family of Holocaust survivors, and there's not many left. There are some. They tend to be elderly, and they're a mixed bag. There have been Jewish believers who survived the Holocaust, and they got saved. The incredible testimony of Rose Wormer among them. The best way to bless the Jews is with the gospel. The worst way to curse the Jews is to withhold the gospel. A social gospel never saved anybody. Now, this is a wide problem. It's not just among Jewish evangelism or in the world of Jewish evangelism that it's become an issue. There are many organizations, from Bernardo's in England to most of the Salvation Army now. World Vision being a tragic case. Organizations that began evangelistically preaching the gospel of salvation and second birth, preaching repentance and faith in Jesus Christ, that no longer do that. They're simply social welfare organizations but call themselves Christian. Christian Aid, World Vision, Bernardo's. They may have begun Christian. They did begin Christian. They were founded by Christians, but they are no longer scripturally Christian. Well, Israel's no different. You have Christian Zionist organizations that are good, that do help needy Jews, that help needy Jewish believers, that have a testimony in the land of Israel, working with the local believers in Israel to help the needy. And they are supportive of Israel against media bias in the diaspora and so forth. and they do a good job, and I have no argument with them. In fact, some of them I can only commend. Prayer for Israel has been generally a good ministry. They're based in Britain. Christian Friends of Israel, CFI, is another one. There are good Christian Zionist organizations. Unfortunately, there are bad ones. Paul makes it clear in the New Testament that the ambassadors of Christ are those who preach him. Someone that does not preach Christ does not have the right to call themselves his ambassadors. Yet you have an organization that calls itself the International Christian Embassy, with a history of scandal on back of it. Its founding members have left on bad terms. The Watsons from Canada and many others will have nothing to do with it. It began right, but just became a political, social organization that befriends rabbinic Judaism and distances itself from Jewish believers. Bridges for Peace is another one, a simple social welfare organization. No Christ, no peace. There's nothing wrong with helping needy immigrants or Holocaust survivors, but don't withhold the gospel. Here, Jew, we love you. We're going to support Zionism. We're going to give you some furniture and a Hanukkah present. Now go to hell without Yeshua, your Messiah. That's not the love of the Lord. We have these people who come here and they say, you want this and this and this to happen so the Lord will come back and you can go to heaven. That's why you want the temple rebuilt. You either love Israel or you don't. Now, while these things may be true prophetically, they are true. That's not the love of the Lord for Israel. The love of the Lord for Israel is a burden for their salvation. If any organization does not evangelize Jews, that is dual covenant theology or has a non-evangelistic policy, these people bringing in boats actually signed agreements with these boats bringing in immigrants from the former Soviet not to evangelize. There were people with buses bringing in Jews agreeing not to evangelize. Can you imagine Paul or Peter saying, just bring the Jews back to Israel for the Great Tribulation, but don't give them the gospel? These people are at best misguided, but there's been a lot of con artistry in some of these organizations. We know from people who left them on bad terms and disclosed the corruption and so forth. The leader of one of them was a pedophile, and this got in the newspapers. I do not say that expatriate ministries or expatriate organizations have to go out in a high-profile way and hand out tracts and evangelize Jews aggressively. That is the work of the local congregations and the Jewish evangelistic ministries. That's not the work of expatriates. Expatriates are better to practice lifestyle evangelism, friendship evangelism. Let the unsaved Jews see your good works, build a relationship, and share within that context. I agree with that. We've had cases, a number of years ago this was, now more than 25 years ago, but I remember. Some guy came from, I think it was Ohio, and another from Finland. And they preached the gospel publicly on the streets, not in Hebrew, they didn't know Hebrew, not knowing anything about Israel, and not in any kind of cooperation with local believers. They caused violent reactions. They went back to Finland and Ohio and told their churches how they preached the gospel in Jerusalem like the apostles when the local believers are having the windows broken. A terrible thing once happened in Tiberias, but I won't go into it. I don't say expatriate organizations that are supportive of Israel, Christian Zionists, should evangelize in a high-profile way. I do not say that. The local believers need to do that. The Jewish evangelistic organizations do that. However, when you are dual covenant theology and say Jews don't need the gospel to be saved, when you go the way of John Hagee, or when you actually sign an agreement not to give a Jew the gospel at all, like those people with those ships, or when you befriend the rabbinic establishment and distance yourself from the Jewish believers who are Israeli because they're an embarrassment to you and they will cause you inconvenience in your relationship with the Israeli politicians and rabbis. And they do this. They want to be on the platform with the politicians and rabbis, so they will distance themselves from the local believers who are an embarrassment to them. Such organizations should not be supported. They do more harm than good. There are both good Christian Zionist organizations and bad ones. Again, I do not say they should all evangelize in a high-profile way. They should not. They should evangelize in a low-profile way. But if they're dual covenant theology, or if they signed agreements not to evangelize at all, not to give a Jew the New Testament in Hebrew or whatever, keep away from them. Have nothing to do with them. Your prayers and support are needed by the local believers, by the local congregations. They're just diverting resources away from the real embassies, those who preach Yeshua. That's a very good question. We have spoken about it before on a teaching tape, but I do thank you for asking it. It's something that needs to be readdressed periodically. Thank you so much for your question. Please pray for the peace of Jerusalem and for the salvation of Israel, both Jew and Arab. And pray for the local believers. And pray that the Lord meets their needs, spiritually, financially, and otherwise, and that He enables Moriel to continue to support the local congregations in their task of evangelism and discipleship. Now, we also are sponsoring, it's not a Moriel work, but we are the financial sponsors of a tremendous work, the only one of its kind, among Bedouin Arabs in the Negev. The evangelization of Bedouins and children's ministry among the Bedouins. I can't talk too much about this work for certain reasons, to do with security as well, but please pray for this work. God has a plan for Abraham's other children, the Arabs. He loves them too, and Jesus wants to save them too. And it is a blessing and a privilege for us to be sponsoring evangelistic outreach to these people who still ride camels and live in the desert. It's amazing. Nonetheless, that's the situation. Thank you so much once again for your question. My name is Jacob Prasch. God bless. Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Blessings, dear friends. Greetings in Jesus. This is your friend Jacob Prasch speaking to you at the moment from the UK. You know, so many of the questions we get in our Roku broadcast and on our Vimeo clips and on YouTube deal with subjects that we deal with much more extensively in our books. We can't, for the sake of brevity, go into the kind of depth in a TV broadcast we can actually go into in a book. But so many of the questions come from material that are expounded in the books on a much more broader scale that it's almost frustrating sometimes that we can't spend hours and hours answering the questions that are given to us. Obviously, practicality dictates that's not a possibility. The books are there. They're available. They're available in print through the Moriel catalog on the Moriel website, moriel.org. But in this day of Kindle and electronic books, they're also available through Amazon, and they're available through Kindle. The three books that would be the most referred to in the questions we receive are the three latest books. The first being The Dilemma of Laodicea. The Dilemma of Laodicea. It's an exposition of the seven churches in Revelation, culminating with the final two churches, Philadelphia and Laodicea particularly, setting the stage for the return of Jesus. The Dilemma of Laodicea would be the first. The second would be shadows of the beast. Shadows of the beast. How the coming Antichrist, how his identity will be revealed to the faithful church. The rapture will not happen. Will not happen, absolutely not happen, until the faithful church knows who the ultimate beast of Revelation is. That is the Antichrist and also the false prophet. How the identity of the coming Antichrist will be revealed to the faithful church. Shadows of the Beast, the second book. And the final and latest one, harpazo. Harpazo. What the scripture actually teaches about the rapture, the snatching away which takes place between the 6th and 7th seals in the book of Revelation. So these three books, The Dilemma of Laodicea, Shadows of the Beast, and Harpazo, all available on the Moriel catalog, all available through Amazon, and all easily available electronically by Kindle. Thank you so much, dear friends. God bless. May Jesus be with you.